Hello, my name is Steve Bennett, and my goal of this presentation is to introduce you to a process-based low-tech restoration method for addressing the lack of woody debris in streams. And I'll also describe some preliminary results where we test the effectiveness of a method called high-density large woody debris in a large-scale experimental setting. I just want to acknowledge my collaborators and funders. Much of my research is conducted in Southeast Washington, where I work in the Columbia River Basin studying Endangered Species Act listed salmon and steelhead populations. The principal funding agencies for my research are NOAA Fisheries, Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, and the Washington State Salmon Recovery Funding Board. And I also collaborate with a large group of local agencies. I'm based in Logan at Utah State University, and I'm a research lead in the Fluvial Habitat Center at the Department of Watershed Sciences. And I work with a large group of researchers who focus on developing tools to increase the cost effectiveness of watershed assessments and also develop and test the effectiveness of process-based low-tech restoration approaches. So for my presentation, I'm going to quickly introduce the topic of intensively monitored watersheds and just define those for people. Then I'm going to talk about the setting of my particular study and its design. And then I'll give you some preliminary results on the effectiveness of this restoration method, high density large woody debris. So in the Columbia River Basin, hundreds of millions of dollars are spent annually to improve freshwater habitat for endangered species. But over the last 10 to 20 years, it's become clear that there's very little data to show the effectiveness of this large investment in habitat restoration. And so a group of watersheds were selected to test the effectiveness of common restoration approaches. And one of those creeks was Soton Creek, which is circled on the picture in the southeast corner of Washington. The goal of these intensively monitored watersheds is to determine if restoration actions are creating more fish, then determine if there is change, what are the causal mechanisms that are leading to that change, and then use that information to extrapolate the lessons learned in these experiments to other similar watersheds where this level of intensive monitoring is not possible. So the Soton Creek IMW is located in southeast Washington. It's currently a wild steelhead refuge. So it's mostly made up, or has returning wild steelhead, and the focus of the experiment is steelhead. This is a zoomed in aerial photo of the three streams involved in the study: Charlie Creek, North Fork Creek, and South Fork Creek, and there's some basic statistics there on their character. The climate in this area is quite dry, especially in the lower parts of the watersheds where we only get 10 to 20 inches of rain. Dryland wheat farming takes place on the upper benches that you can see labeled dissected loess uplands. And the streams flow through very narrow valleys that can be less than 100 feet wide with steep side hills and that are fairly confining. And the study is made up of these three streams which have fairly different character. So Charlie Creek is fairly stable with cool water and spring-fed. South Fork is fairly warm with flashy flows, and the North Fork has the lowest gradient and is more meandering and larger in size. So the habitat degradation that we're trying to restore is a common ailment to many streams where they're recovering from past disturbance and they have young riparian forests growing up around them. However, these forests are made up of small trees, so they're not putting in any large wood to the stream, and the dense nature of the riparian growth is locking the stream in place, and so the channels tend to be straight and have low diversity and are very good at transporting sediment and wood out of the watershed. So we refer to these types of streams as somewhat of a bowling alley situation. The goals of the experiment are to test whether we can take these simplified stream habitats with moderate numbers of fish, add high densities of wood, and create more habitat diversity, sort of increase in pool habitat and other types of habitat, and increase the fish population by 25%. We have a experimental and monitoring design to test the effectiveness of the restoration. The design is slightly different in that we've treated each stream, a section of each stream where we have added wood, and we've staggered the restoration over multiple years to reduce the effective year and to make it more logistically feasible to do the restoration. The whole study area is about 22 miles, and each of the little oval sections you see there are about 2.5 miles long, so approximately 7 miles in each stream. And the ovals are our treatment or control sections. I won't go into great detail on the actual monitoring that we're doing, but it is very intensive. So both in the fish monitoring and the habitat monitoring, the IMWs are typically costing $250,000 to $400,000 a year just for monitoring and analysis. In the fish monitoring, we're looking for as many responses as possible. So we're sampling and capturing fish and doing marker capture studies in the summer and fall. We're implanting pit tags, which are pictured in the bottom half of the slide. And these pit tags are passive integrated transponder tags. They're implanted in a small juvenile fish. We've implanted 50,000 pit tags to date. There's been over 400 million pit tags implanted in juvenile salmon and steelhead in the Columbia River Basin since the late 80s. And with these, we can track fish within the watershed and as they move out and down to the ocean and come back again. And that's a primary way we're able to assess abundance, determine growth by catching them over different years, and look at their movement, survival, and carrying capacity. We're also conducting intensive habitat monitoring. We're using the Columbia Habitat Monitoring Protocol. One of the pieces of information we get from this protocol is we do a detailed topographic survey, and that produces a digital elevation model or a map of the topography of the stream. And we're also collecting information about invertebrate drift for fish food, and collecting stream temperature, discharge, and other standard habitat metrics like substrate pools and other features. So the restoration method we've applied is designed to simulate a tree, and we call that method the high density large woody debris method. We carry all the wood into the site so we don't disturb the recovering riparian. We use hydraulic post pounder to drive wooden posts into the stream to hold the small pieces of wood together and simulate a tree or a log jam. And we call the individual structures post-assisted log structures, or PALS. We design the structures in the field with a custom iPad. It takes about 5 minutes or less to design a structure. We focus on constructing high density of structures over a large area. This is intended to shock the system with wood, give the stream some of the decision making, and to generally not over-design the structures or the treatment. Some construction statistics. In Yosoten, we've built over 700 of these post-assisted log structures over 9 miles, or approximately 40% of the study area. We can build 10 to 20 of these structures a day with one crew of 4 or 5 people. And the density of the structures is somewhere between 3 and 5 structures every 100 yards. All the wood was donated and is essentially waste wood from the Forest Service, from thinning seed tree lots. And we use conservation crews and college kids to construct these structures with minimal training. So as far as the effectiveness of the structures go, we've added over, and just the general method, we've added over 15,000 pieces of wood ranging in size from 3 feet long and 3 inches in diameter to 25 feet long and 20 inches in diameter. That's resulted in an increase of about 150% in the large woody debris density in the study area and treatment areas in particular. And that's led to a 75% increase in the number of pools. What's more interesting is the increase in geomorphic units around each structure. So we visit each structure every year and identify geomorphic units upstream and downstream of the structure. This figure is an example of the configuration of geomorphic units around a single PAL in the South Fork. The brown line is the location of a structure, and moving from left to right is the same structure each year from 2012 to 2015. 2012 is the pre-construction year, and 2013 to 2015 is the post-construction. And the different colors represent different geomorphic units. So as you can see, there's been an increase in the number of geomorphic units around the structure. The previous slide was data that we collected by identifying geomorphic units just with our eyes. Well, we can also use the detailed topographic data that we collected using the CHAMP protocol and produce digital elevation models. And with these digital elevation models, we can use algorithms to identify geomorphic units. And we used a tool developed by Joe at Joe's lab at Utah State to do that. This graph just shows some of the data that we can get. This is an example of pre-restoration, and the we can quantify the geomorphic units by area, and we can categorize them into different groups, concavities or pools, convexities or bars, and planar features or runs and cascades, things like that. And this is the same reach, and the stars are showing different geomorphic units that have changed significantly over that reach. So you can see we got an increase in pools, but we also got increase in different types of bars and these things that we're calling transitional zones. So these are hard to identify areas with your eyes, but the zones between the different geomorphic units. Here's a picture of bar development below a mid-channel structure. And we think bars are really important and likely can lead to changes in stream channel and riparian conditions by raising the bed and providing spawning areas for fish as well. We're really seeing changes in bars. This is an aerial shot of a section of high density large woody debris treatment, and you can see this is during high water in the spring, and we're starting to get floodplain connection. This is the first time we've seen floodplain connection in 10 years at the study site. We also specifically designed the structures to recruit trees and sediment from the banks to promote in-stream diversity, floodplain connection, and also, as this slide shows, kick off self-sustaining processes such as tree recruitment. Another benefit of the high-density large woody debris treatment is that there's such a high density of structures that even if a few structures fail or washed away, other structures downstream are likely to collect the wood and sediment that moves downstream. And this slide just shows that results from 5 years of surveys. And the takeaway here is that in each of the 3 streams, there has been 10 to 15% of the structures that have failed and completely gone. However, there's an equal number almost of new structures created, and these are highlighted by the red arrows, and then the remainder of the structures, 78 to 80 or 90% of the structures are partly to completely still intact. And then finally, this slide is showing the preliminary results for the change in fish abundance. And you can see here that one of the 3 streams has shown a significant change in abundance. That's the North Fork in the middle. The error bars here are 90% confidence limits. And so if they cross 0, then it's not a significant change in abundance between treatment and control sites. So all 3 streams have a mean increase in abundance, but only the North Fork is showing a significant change. So in conclusion, we have demonstrated so far that the high-density large woody debris treatment is a practical, cost-effective, and scalable method for getting wood into streams. We're seeing an increase in geomorphic diversity created by the individual post-assisted log structures at the site scale, and also seeing changes at the reach scale in geomorphic diversity. We're seeing floodplain connection for the first time in 10 years, and it appears that we are starting to see changes in fish abundance, but we have a lot more analysis to do on the fish side of things to really understand how this method has influenced fish production. Okay, thank you very much for listening.